Welcome to the podcast. We're going to read into the world of the independent bookseller, books and the authors that write them, and the publishing industry more broadly. I'm interested to see the quirky ways that quirky creatives make a living in a world that Amazon is disrupting. I'm A.B. Frank, and this is the Bookish Report. This is episode 2 of the Bookish Report podcast, and the interview with Shaun Bythell is on its way, but there's a little bit of a backstory that I'm going to go through first. I went to the Wigtown Book Festival in September 2019, hoping to interview Shaun. He's the author of The Diary of a Bookseller and Confessions of a Bookseller, and the podcast is obviously about books, bookshops, authors, etc., so I thought he'd be a perfect candidate, having read his books and loved them, to interview for the podcast. I emailed him in the lead up to the Wigtown Book Festival, but he'd not replied, unfortunately. So I went to the shop. When I got to Wigtown, I couldn't find him. I was just wandering around his shop, and I ended up leaving a message with the lady at the checkout, and then I went to an event that I'd booked. A couple came and sat down next to me when I was sat at the back of this event just before it started, and we got talking to each other, and I thought somehow I recognised the woman even though I'd never been to Wigtown before. And then I realised that I'd seen her on one of Shaun's YouTube videos in the bookshop because she used to work there. So I told her that I was starting this podcast about books, bookshops, etc., and I was trying to get hold of Shaun for an interview. And she said that he would be up for it, and then proceeded to text him and arrange an interview for me. So shout out to Carol Ann for that, if you're listening. So after this event finished, I went over to the bookshop and up around the winding staircase, which had bookshelves on the walls right the way around to the top. Then I came to this barrier that cuts off the shop from Shaun's private residence. And it's a really grand, I think like Georgian era building. And I could hear his voice coming out from one of the high ceiling rooms, but I couldn't see him. And then a man walked past, and I know that they use part of Shaun's home as a writer's retreat during this festival, so I assumed he was a writer or at least a friend of Shaun's. So I took the opportunity. I said, "Hey, I'm looking for Shaun. I think he's agreed to an interview." And this guy says, "Okay," just smiled at me. He says, "I'll go and get him." He disappeared into the room where you could hear Shaun's voice, reappeared a few seconds later and said, "Yes, come in." Helped me lift up this barrier, which was actually like a stair post thing that goes at the top or at the bottom, that had been fashioned into a barrier on a hinge going across the top of the stairs. So I lifted it up and I walked into the hallway, and I see Shaun walk over to this tray, which was on some drawers of some description, with whiskey bottles, maybe gin bottles as well. And I thought, I could do with settling the nerves with the first real ever interview. But then he turned to me and we shook hands, and he led me into a room at the opposite end where it was all quiet so we could get on with the interview. So he was really quite sort of flexible and hospitable when what was essentially an unplanned interview, and he was more than willing to do it. So like I said, he is the author of 2 books, Diary of a Bookseller and Confessions of a Bookseller. He owns the bookshop in Wigtown. It's called the Bookshop. I'm not just saying the bookshop. There's loads of bookshops in Wigtown. It's a book town. Scotland's national book town as it is. And his books are a documentation of life as a bookseller. And they're so funny as well. Like laugh out loud funny. And there's customers and employees who feature regularly in the books, almost like characters in a story. One's called Mole Man. One's called Bumbag Dave. One spends a lot of time in the erotica section making sounds, as you'll read if you get the books. So we spoke about his life prior to owning a bookshop, some of the ethical and unethical practices in the book selling business, value in private libraries, creative and entrepreneurial endeavours. These are literally the confessions of a bookseller. Enjoy. How do I pronounce your name? That's going to be the first question.
It's Bythell.
Bythell.
Yeah.
I've been saying in my head, Bythell.
Oh, everyone gets it wrong, don't worry.
But you did mention in one of the books, didn't you? Somebody rang you up, I think it was your new one, and somebody trying to get bills or something.
Oh God, yeah.
And then you just put a little note saying, and she pronounced the name right.
Yeah, it's quite unusual for that to happen. Yeah.
So, can you tell us a bit about yourself before you became a bookseller? Sort of the preceding years?
Yeah, my life before that, I studied law at university, and then decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. So, kind of went through my 20s just doing a series of really crappy jobs. So I worked in construction, gas pipeline construction, and then at the University of the West of England I worked on 2 documentaries, but I got to the age of 30 and I thought, right, I've kind of missed out on the whole career ladder thing.
What was your role in the documentaries?
I was a researcher, which is, I really enjoyed it actually. I think the researcher really, without wishing to blow my own trumpet, because I think, I've seen all the different roles, the researcher really makes the film, in terms of like who you choose to see, who ends up, you work with the director to see obviously who ends up being involved. You introduce the director to, well, certainly with the documentary, it's obviously different for other sort of formats, but yeah, it was a lot of work, but it was good fun. I really enjoyed, because you see the whole process, right from the beginning to the end, whereas the director kind of swans in and out a bit, and the producer, once you've got the money, generally stays in the background.
Yeah, so you've done that, and we'll get onto some other sort of creative stuff you've done, but you seem to have been involved in like creative things for a while then.
Yeah, even gas pipelines I kind of saw as a creative process, because you're starting with nothing and you're ending with, I suppose it's a product, but or a service, but it was, even that you can see as a creative process.
Yeah. And then how did you get into the industry, selling books?
I was just, because I grew up here, and I was visiting my parents, and the guy who owned my shop, who set it up, was about to retire, and he said, "Why don't you buy my shop?" And so I thought, well, I don't have any money, but he said, don't worry about that, just go to the bank. And that was it. The bank lent me the money, and here I am. It was by far the best kind of happy accident that's ever happened to me.
Yeah.
It was great.
Now that sounds like something that would be sort of a good way to get into something that you're interested in.
And I think the good thing about approaching it that way is, okay, I'd borrowed the money, so if it didn't work out, I'd borrowed it against property, so I could sell the property and probably pay the money back, and limit my losses. So it wasn't. It was I think that's the way I've kind of approached everything. Actually, every financial decision is how much can I afford to lose before I get out of it, and that way, hopefully, you end up not losing everything.
Yeah, not losing your shirt.
Yeah.
And when was it when you acquired the shop?
2001, November 2001.
18 years, is that?
Yeah. So,
and it was a bookshop prior, wasn't it?
It had been a bookshop, I think, for 20 years before then, or 25 years. So I bought it with all the stock, but I've made a huge number of changes mainly in the first 5 years, actually, that we did all the stuff. We took all the old shelves out and replaced them with new shelves. And when I say old, I don't mean like antique, I mean just kind of MFI from the 1970s stuff.
Yeah.
So it was really crap. Ripped up all the carpets, sanded the floors, painted the walls and ceilings, and just kind of overhauled the place. But yeah, it's been an interesting 18 years.
Yeah, so I was just wandering around downstairs a few minutes ago, and is the layout got any method to it, or is it just the way that it's...
It was kind of the layout that I inherited. I inherited when I bought the shop, as in the history section was where the history section is now, but I've moved the shelves around, but more or less kept with the original structure. So I don't know I think they just expanded. John, the previous owner, started with just the room at the front, and then expanded as he got more stock. So I think it just evolved naturally that way.
So you sell second-hand books, and I've seen your book down there, but do you sell any other new books?
We do sell a few new books, really mainly Scottish and particularly local.
Supporting like the local authors.
Yeah, and also people in the area want books about the area. So we've got lots of walking books, lots of history books.
Is that a thing wherever you go, like different parts of the country?
Yeah, I think so. Most bookshops, most decent bookshops, will have quite a strong section of
the area.
Yeah. And it makes economic sense because people buy those books. People come to the area, want to know.
People are like travelling there.
Yeah, or holiday
tourists,
here. Yeah. So they want to know more about the area when they get here. So that's the best way to do it.
In your first book, you mentioned George Orwell's Bookshop Memories, is it, or Memoirs?
Bookshop Memories.
Bookshop Memories, and William Y. Darling, The Bankrupt Bookseller.
Yeah.
Are these books that aspiring booksellers should be reading?
I think
advise them to do
I definitely read Bookshop Memories because that's non-fictional. That's Orwell's actual experience, and it's short. It only takes 20 minutes to read.
Oh wow!
It's an essay. In fact, it probably doesn't even take 20 minutes. Probably take 10 minutes. Will Y. Darling, The Bankrupt Bookseller, is a fictionalised account. And it kind of tends to stray off the subject of bookselling and into kind of more philosophical areas. But there's another one which I'm...
Is the one you mentioned in your second
John
book?
Baxter Bookseller, The Intimate Thoughts of John Baxter. That's a really good book. Again, it's fictional. But I think if you're a bookseller, reading books about bookselling is really interesting, whether they're fictional or non-fictional.
Yeah. How do they sort of help somebody that would be doing it? So do they give?
They don't really help you. They just show you really. Certainly, within Orwell's case, it was 1938. I think it was written, or 36. They show you really that not much has changed apart
that seems
from.
To be a year that crops up a lot. 1937, 38 time.
Yeah.
Like Think and Grow Rich and stuff was all published around then. I know a couple of Cyril Connolly wrote a popular book that's still sort of printed today.
Sorry, this is private up here.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
That's okay.
Sorry.
I think it is. I think in this sort of run up to the war, there was a lot to write about. Things were changing. You had this sort of reconstruction of Germany after the First World War, the rise of the Nazis, and things were happening.
I was going to say, in your first book, you mentioned that sort of bestsellers aren't much of a cash cow.
No, not here, because they're published in such vast numbers that you go into any charity shop and you can see all of last year, well, not last year's, but the last 10 years bestsellers.
See a lot of Stephen King, James Patterson.
Yeah, Stephen King I can sell actually, but James Patterson not so much. But the sort of Wilbur Smiths and people like that used to be, and probably still are, published in such vast quantities. But people don't want them second hand; they want them new.
Yeah.
So when they appear second hand, the only people who would have ever wanted to read them in the first place have already read them. So they don't have a second-hand shelf life.
The first book you also mentioned. The first book's called The Diary of a Bookseller.
Yeah.
And the second is
Confessions of a Bookseller.
Right, just getting it right. You mentioned people like putting up a ghost listing online.
Yeah, it's
at like a cheaper price than actual genuine
listings.
listings.
So the price matching software relists it at a lower price, and then they buy at the cheaper price.
That's what. Yeah.
It's a pretty. I mean, it's not illegal, but it's a pretty unethical thing to do.
Yeah.
But I've kind of almost given up selling online now. I've been suspended from Abe, and Abe was kind of an okay website to sell on. But now that I've been suspended, I'm just thinking, do you know what? It's just not worth the hassle. Every day brings fresh headaches when you're selling online.
Yeah, it seems like it's quite a high maintenance piece of software.
It is, yeah.
Like,
I mean,
the
only
you mentioned that, and
yeah,
Monsoon as well.
Monsoon, fucking hell, Monsoon's a nightmare. But I'm getting my website redesigned now, so I'll just sell on my own website, and then I don't have to worry about fulfillment rates. I don't have to worry about customer feedback. I don't have to worry about any of the stuff that comes with Amazon and Abe. So hopefully, I know I'll lose trade because they're the big portals that everybody thinks they need, but I don't care. I think I'd rather, for an easier life, I'd rather not have to deal with them.
So was there problems with when you actually sell a physical copy that it wasn't being taken away?
Yeah, that's one of the problems, is that if we sell something that we've listed online through the shop, we have to delist it from the database.
Yourself, manually?
Yeah. Which you just have to type a number in and it takes it off.
You'd think it would just go with the sale.
Well, because nothing's barcoded,
Right.
most of the books we're listing online are pre-ISBN, pre-barcode. So you can't just scan it. You have to ascribe it a number and remove the number by hand.
Right. So, and who are the sort of people that are doing those fake listings? Is it other booksellers, or is it
I think it was
private?
other booksellers, because only other booksellers would have understood that how the software works well
Right.
enough to be able to know how to do that. But I think I don't know if people still do it, to be honest, but they were doing it. I think it's probably just unscrupulous collectors who just know the second-hand book trade and just want to get themselves. It's not normally people buying things to sell on. I think it's normally people buying things because they want them but think they're too expensive.
Yeah.
So instead of £400, if they can get it for £4, they're also banking on a degree of ignorance on part of the seller, not noticing that has dropped. So, by 100%, well, not 100%, it's dropped from 400 to £4 or 40 or 50 or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much it goes on now, and whether or not those websites have taken steps to kind of cut down on that sort of thing.
Yeah. And where's that price matching software housed? Is it?
It's in Monsoon.
In Monsoon, right?
Or any other of the. So Monsoon lists to
Does Amazon
multiple.
have one as well?
Amazon has basically tried to kind of shut down Monsoon, which is why Monsoon keeps. It doesn't work a lot of the time. It's because Amazon tinkers around with something in Amazon and doesn't tell Monsoon that it's done it, and then suddenly there's a clash of software. But yeah, the software is in Monsoon. So the good thing about Monsoon is it allows you to upload to multiple platforms. So you don't have to go into Abe, list your books. You don't have to then go into Amazon and do the same thing. You don't have to go onto eBay and do it. You don't have to do it onto your website, do it all separately. Monsoon just does it all to all platforms for you, all the platforms you want. And if a book sells, either in the shop or online, it takes it off all the platforms, so you don't suddenly get 2 orders for the same book on the same day.
Yeah.
So it is good in that regard. It was quite pioneering, but I don't know. There are probably easier ways to do it now.
Yeah, some new stuff might pop up soon.
Yeah.
How common is it that when people see a book in the shop, they go away and then buy it online?
Almost every day I would say that happens, and almost every day someone comes in and says, I was in here last week or whatever and saw a book and I can't find it now, which either means it's sold or they just can't remember where it was. So people do come back to the shop as well. But yeah, I would say, the other day someone took a picture of a page of a cookbook, I can't remember what it was, and said, I didn't want to buy it because I only wanted that recipe. And I thought, well, fuck you, you just took a picture of a book I'm selling in my shop because you only wanted one recipe from it. It's things like that happen, and people, I think, increasingly think it's okay to do that, but it's not.
No, it's not. I think in one of your books you touch on library books briefly.
Mhm.
Are they worth less or more when you
Oh,
when you get
considerably less. I've just written something for a magazine actually about that very subject.
Oh right.
So a library book is usually worth ex-library book, depending on how many stickers and stamps and things it's got on it, probably about a tenth of what it would be worth
But
if it hadn't been through the library system.
wow, that's a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, most book dealers won't touch ex-library books, but if they've got illustrations in them or haven't been too badly stamped and stickered, then you can usually do something with them. But normally you'd only buy something with copper plate illustrations, because you could take the plates out and sell them separately.
Yeah, you spoke about those copper plates in the
Mhm.
second book, didn't you?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I'd not heard of it before.
Oh, so different. So basically, you've got about four, probably a lot more actually, 4 or 5 types of book illustration. So the first ones would have probably been woodcuts, and then lino cuts. Maybe lino cuts would be later actually. So copper plates. So the printer would take a copper plate, literally a sheet of copper, and get an illustrator to cut lines in. It's almost like a negative, and then ink it up, and it goes onto the paper.
Right.
And you can see the impression of the lines and the plate and things on on a decent copper plate illustration. And then in the 19th century, 18th, 19th century, steel plate came in, and then after that it was lithography, which is acid etching on stone basically. But so those are and then photography obviously after that. So you have those kind of that evolution of illustrations, but the copper plates are the nicest, and woodcuts are beautiful too.
And you mentioned as well in the first book that about sort of buying stock and acquiring stock and libraries of people and collections of other people's. That the only rules to like valuing potential stock are the rules that you set for yourself.
Yeah, pretty much. Every negotiation is on its own terms. There are no official rules or guidelines or anything. So usually you just look at things, and if you've seen them before, you know how much you've sold them for before. So you make an offer based on that. If you haven't seen them before, you can usually look at them and think, okay, I've sold something like that before for £50. I can offer 25, 30, whatever. But yeah, you just have to make it up as you go along.
Are there any sort of best practices that aren't sort of specific to each unique negotiation?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would always do is, if you seriously undervalue something and find out that it's worth, you offer 50 quid for it and it turns out to be worth 50,000, you've got to go back to the person you bought it for and redress the balance and give them a fair share of their money. So,
yeah.
But that's not everybody's way of doing things.
No.
And especially if it's a genuine mistake, you've got to, you're kind of morally obliged to sort that out. And
yeah, the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think, and there's a very famous story about some William Blake prints that changed hands in Scotland about 20 years ago, and somebody who knew exactly what they were doing, I think, offered a few £1,000s for them, and I think they sold them to the British Museum for about 2 million, and they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And that all went to court, and it all got messy, and it exposed the dealers who had behaved atrociously. And I think everybody got compensated adequately.
Yeah.
But why bother? Why do that? Why be greedy when you don't
especially
really,
with that sort of sum of money.
Yeah, and it's going to be so public that the British Library has offered that much money that the person who they said, they're only worth a few £1,000s to, it's not like they're not going to find out.
Yeah, probably ask, where did you get it?
Yeah, they know exactly.
Is it like a track record or a paper trail for expensive books?
Provenance, only if they've been through auctions.
Like car car as a logbook or something.
Yeah,
like
no, there isn't, unless they've consistently sold and resold through auctions, in which case the auction houses keep records.
Okay. Talk to me about the open book. That's quite a
Yeah,
unique
it was
idea.
my ex-girlfriend's idea, which was to... she came to Scotland. She ended up in Wigtown and here because she'd had this dream. She was working for NASA, and she'd always had this sort of dream about working in a bookshop in Scotland by the sea. So she emailed me and came and stayed, and then there was an empty bookshop in the town, empty as in full of books but never open, and she thought, I can't be the only person to have this idea of working in a bookshop as a kind of working holiday. So she persuaded my parents to buy the shop and convert the upstairs into a flat, and put it on Airbnb, and it now has a waiting list. Oh, it's so popular, it has a waiting list of 20 years. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
And when did your parents buy the shop? When was
It
that?
must be about 4 years ago, so I think it's been going for about 3 years.
How did you market that idea? Did it sort of take off?
Jessica did it. She's quite shrewd with things like that, so she put it on Airbnb, and she knew that Airbnb would do something like, say, would pick up on it because it's such an unusual thing.
Yeah.
So it was all over the sort of homepage of Airbnb, so it got that exposure, and then obviously journalists saw it, and about 7 or 8 journalists over the last few years have stayed there and written about it on BuzzFeed, the Daily Telegraph, and various other.
Yeah, I think I saw a little video, a 1.5-minute video or something on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
A BBC piece.
BBC have done a piece, so it's got pretty wide exposure, and continues to get more and more. It's been a phenomenal success. So.
Yeah, it sounds it. Because the second book, when were you writing that? What year was that?
I wrote it, so it was 2016. No, 2015. It was.
Yeah, because in that I think you mentioned it as like a 3-year waiting list.
Oh right, okay. So yeah,
So
no, it's
now
gone
it's
up to 20. Yeah.
So yeah, it seems to be doing quite well.
Yeah, it's been a great success.
And so the stock in there, is that like yours or your parents? Or do people bring
It
it with
belongs
them?
to my parents, but it's because one of the things that's difficult for the people who are running the open book to do is buy new stock, because whose money do they use to buy it? How do they value it? So a lot of my rotated stock from the shop I box up and I take over there. So it's mostly my old stock, but not all. I mean, they do get donated stuff and things. So yeah, it's interesting.
How long is a typical stay? Is there a minimum
A
you've
week, I think, is the minimum, and they try to encourage 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of work involved in the background, picking people up from airports or train stations if they don't drive.
Do they have their own problems with the monsoon and stuff like that as well?
No, they don't do any online stuff.
Right.
It's purely through the shop.
Right, so it removes a headache. And
Yeah, absolutely.
Or potential support that you'd need to provide, showing them how to do stuff. Has there been any horror stories of people staying there, or is it been?
No, I think it's all been. I think a couple of people turned up and actually expected it to be bed and breakfast, whereas it's not. It's Airbnb, where it's self-catering.
Yeah.
So people, there was one couple who were a bit disappointed there wasn't someone there with sausages and bacon and eggs for them every morning. So
the Airbnb literally.
Yeah.
Tell me about the Random Book Club. There's another quite.
Yeah. So
in fact, are you the only people to have done back to the open book? Are you the only? Is that the first?
Yeah, other
thing of
people
its
have
kind?
started copying it now, but I think I'm not involved in it, but I think Jessica and a couple of other people are trying to work out if they can brand it and franchise it,
Right.
Rather than just other people can do it if they want. There's no exclusivity on the idea. But yeah, I think we were the first for sure.
Where has it been imitated? Is it?
I think,
in the
I
UK,
can't
or?
remember. Yeah, I think someone in Hay on Wye. I think someone
Wales,
in
is that?
Birmingham. Yeah, but I don't really know. I'm not really involved in it.
Oh, okay, right. What about the Random Book Club? That's your idea, isn't it?
Yeah, I set that up after the financial crash of 2008, and basically you pay £60 a year and you get a book sent to you once a month, but you've got no idea what you're going to get. You've got no control over it. So I'm the filter. I basically decide you won't get ex-library books, you won't get book club things. But it was great. It really saved my bacon back then, actually. It didn't really, and still doesn't really, make me any money. So I kind of look at it like a loan. It makes me a little bit of money, but not much. But I think, so after the book came out, it went from about 100 subscribers to over 1,000. So I've had to put a cap on it because it's unmanageable. But in terms of, as a business, if I tweaked it a bit, if I had time to tweak it a bit, increase the cost a little bit, set things up, try and renegotiate my postal contract, that could be a hugely profitable business.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not sure what to do with it at the moment. I just don't, because of writing and running the shop and going to book festivals and things. I just don't have the time to give it what it deserves.
So you're giving writing more of a go now, are you?
My publisher seems to want a third book.
Is it going to be the same format?
I think so. I mean, I find it much easier writing in diary format. I'm speaking to my agent this afternoon, and we'll discuss how to proceed. So we'll see.
Do they in the Random Book Club? Going back to that, do they all get the same book?
No, everyone gets a different book.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it depends what I've been buying, really. So, but yeah, everyone's supposed to get a different book.
You were involved in starting the festival, were you?
I was involved in the early days of it. Yeah. I didn't do a huge amount, but the person who really took it from kind of tiny amateur thing to really slick professional thing was a guy called Finn McGrath, who's a local farmer. And he stood in as director and just shook the whole thing up and gave us a constitution and made us a charity and managed to get more funding, and it went dramatically from just being kind of bungling amateurs to something quite slick and big in a very short time.
How long has it been going now? How many years is this?
21st year this year.
Right. What goes into putting on the festival? All the background work?
Well, I'm not so sure now, because we've got a board of trustees who meet, I think, every couple of months, and we've got a full-time team in the office, and an artistic director, Adrian, who is he puts the programme together, and I think there are 5 full-time employees now.
Is the office just down the road?
Yeah, it's number 11, and a huge team of volunteers of, I think, about 150 volunteers who are superb, and without whom we'd have absolutely no chance of putting the festival on at all. So,
yeah. They arrange the speakers.
Well, they pick people up from the railway stations. They take tickets at the door. They help move furniture around. Yeah, there's just no limit to what they'll do. They're brilliant.
Yeah, and do you have to get any special permissions from council?
Oh yeah, to put marquees up and things like that.
Yeah.
So and closing roads and stuff. Yeah, you definitely need the council on your side. But they've been really good, actually.
So it's good for the
economy
area,
in the area. Yeah, so they've been.
Yeah, I emailed Andrew from Belty. Is it Belty Books? Is that
Yeah.
how you say it? Hopefully to speak to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he said in the first weekend of the festival, I think last year, that it brought in the same revenue as June.
Yeah, it really is a huge benefit to the economy.
Yeah.
It's really good.
But do you know how many people come for the festival over the 10 days or so?
Ticket sales, I think, last year were probably, I think we sold about 20,000 tickets over the 10 days.
10 days, yeah.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean 20,000 people. I mean, I'm hopefully going to go to about 6 or 7 events. So yeah, it's still you're still talking probably 15,000 people coming for the over the 10 days.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, it's a huge number.
For a town of like 900, is it?
Yeah.
Many multiples of the
Yeah,
population
absolutely.
turning up for 10 days.
Yeah, it's great.
How do the authors get like a spot in the festival to speak? Do they sort of come to you, or do you reach out?
I don't really know, because Adrian puts the program together.
Right,
so
yeah.
I think he speaks to publishers and sees what they've got coming out. So it's usually people who've got a new book.
Yeah.
So you don't get the same person back year after year to talk about the same book. But yeah, it's Adrian and the publishers. He'll speak to them
Yeah.
and see what they've got coming out. That
Do you have any regular guests? I know you had the writers' retreat where
Yeah,
you spoke
Rob
about
Twigger. Yeah, Twigger's here at the moment, and Stuart Kelly, who does who interviews, and yeah, we've got most of the people who are regulars are interviewers, so they chair events.
Okay, right.
So yeah, Peggy Hughes, Lee Randall, Stuart Kelly, Twigger, they're all sort of, they come every year to basically chair.
So you mentioned fulfilled by Amazon a couple of times in your books.
Mm-hmm.
How do you use that, and like when would you use that?
I don't use it anymore, but it was useful because it was Amazon had this thing where you could list your stock, box it, and send it up to one of their warehouses, and then if it got ordered, they would pack it and send it out to you. Which meant that if you were short of space, it was great because you could just use the Amazon warehouse. But then they started sneakily introducing new fees and new, increasing their storage charges and things like that, to the point at which it just stopped being viable. For me anyway. So I just pulled all my stock from Fulfilled by Amazon, and I don't have any stock on Amazon at all anymore. I don't use Amazon. About twice a year, there's something I can only get through Amazon if I can't find a kind of route back to the supplier directly. Then I have to buy it through Amazon. But that's maybe twice a year now. It's all I just try and avoid it at all.
Yeah, but you're vocal about your not liking it.
Yeah,
Amazon in the books, aren't you? Anyway.
I think it's just a really, really nasty organisation.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, I remember talking to this woman called Bernadette, I can't remember her second name, and she was basically saying that in the sort of height of the Soviet Union, there was one shop, and if you look at the sort of natural evolution of capitalism, there's going to be one shop, and it's going to be Amazon. I think maybe taking it to an extreme, but I think she had a very valid point, which is that is what Bezos wants to do.
Yeah.
He wants to be the only shop in town.
Take it all.
Yeah.
In your new book, you mention, I might not pronounce this right, an Alma Tadema.
Lawrence Alma Tadema.
A sketch that you found inside a copy of a book that you were selling, and you sold it for 145 quid, which was like 5 times what you expected, I think.
Yeah.
Have you got any other stories or like anecdotes of sort of quirky things?
Yeah, I bought a book, box of books from a book dealer, and one of the books was signed by Florence Nightingale. So you do find a lot of things like that. Also, I bought some books recently from someone, one of which was 2-volume Aubrey Beardsley, I think, and I didn't know what it was worth, so I said I'd get back to him, and then the customer came in and said, "Oh, that's worth about £800. I'll give you £800 for it." So I said that's fine, and then I found out he'd sold it at auction for 19,000.
Wow, so that's like what you were talking about.
And he didn't give me a penny. So
that's like what you were talking about before.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was pretty pissed off about that, and pissed off on behalf of the customer, because I felt like I couldn't give him anything like that. I had to give him part of the £800 that I'd sold it for. So yeah, it was a bit unscrupulous.
So if you decided to get a book that's signed by Florence Nightingale, what would that do to the price?
The book was a Charles Kingsley book. It wasn't a valuable one, so it's probably worth about £5. And but Florence Nightingale's signature is worth about £300. So yeah, I sold it to a nurse in America for around about 300. It's a long time ago. I can't remember the exact price, but
No, but it's good when you get a little Easter egg type.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What's the Association of Wigtown Booksellers?
It's just everyone who has a book business in Wigtown. Well, not everyone, but a bunch of us who meet every couple of months and we put on a spring festival, and just do the odd other event. So it's just our little local group of booksellers.
Yeah, sort of supporting each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I was going to say, from the outside looking in, I'd say you're like quite an entrepreneur, like with all these little.
I wouldn't. But
say from the outside looking in, you got these like, handful of little ventures you've took on, like the Random Book Club.
Yeah.
And the sort of helping out with the festival and the shop itself.
Yeah, I think in a small town you've got to have more than one string to your bow. I think the economy is always depressed, so you've got to do more than one thing, I think, to survive. I think that's all it is. It's not necessarily being entrepreneurial, it's survival.
Right.
Yeah.
So it forces you to be
You've
creative.
got to be a bit innovative, yeah.
What other sort of stuff have you done like that I've not touched on? Or do you plan on doing?
Not much, really. I think that's enough. Yeah. I would like to grow the Random Book Club, but I just don't have time.
Yeah, pretty much done now. I was going to say, what books do you sort of read? What sort of thing are you into?
Generally read fiction, and generally contemporary fiction, but I've got into reading older things, and more recently translations of books written originally in other languages. So that's the authors I'd had heard of, like people like Jose Saramago and Antonio Tabucci. So yeah, one of my friends who's Italian has introduced me to loads of authors. So I'm kind of broadening my range at the moment. I'm currently rereading.
That's my next question.
Adrian Mole. You heard of Adrian Mole?
No.
Secret
But I
Diary
just
of
thought
Adrian
straight
Mole.
away when you said that mole man who comes in the shop.
No, Adrian Mole is a fictional creation of a woman called Sue Townsend who died a couple of years ago. And it's brilliant. It's incredibly funny and very well written. So.
Yeah. Last question. Like, what book do you gift or recommend the most to somebody?
Recently, probably say The Master and Margarita by Bulgakov. It's just a brilliant book. It's so fantastical.
Is that what Emanuela?
Yeah, Emanuela recommended it to me. I can't recommend it highly enough. And actually, I recently saw on John Boyne's Twitter feed that he had. It was the one book he knows he ought to read, but just struggles with and never gets that far into it. And I just thought everybody loved it, but obviously not. But it's great. Yeah. It's a really good book.
Right, well that's it. I mean, I appreciate your time.
That's fine.
What
No
you're
problem.
doing as well. I think it's quite impressive.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Any social media you want to shout out?
Nah, it's all right. I think.
I'll put links to the book in anyway.
Okay, cool.
And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed meeting Shaun and hearing what he had to say. The only downside is that we only had a short window to do the interview, so I hope to speak with Shaun again soon, maybe at the 2020 Wigtown Book Festival, or upon the release of his new book, if that comes before then, because he did mention that he was going to be writing another book. And I can't recommend Shaun's books that he's already written highly enough. I have affiliate links to his books in the description and the show notes, and if you use these links, I will get a small commission, which will help me carry on doing this podcast and bring you more interviews like this one. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, _ABFrank. This is the end of the episode. Subscribe on whatever podcast provider you use and rate the show on iTunes, and I'll catch you in the next one.